Okay, now I want to talk through the prep that we had on sketching quadratics. There are a few sort of minor mistakes that we just need to get sorted. So, first of all, I'm going to show you what we need to start doing. So we're told about these graphs, and effectively every single one of these questions, A, B, C, D, and E, are all going to lead us to drawing a successful quadratic, okay? So first of all, what we're looking to do when we're sketching a quadratic, so sketching means it does not need to be wholly accurate, it doesn't need to be like measured out with a ruler, but it does need to be like a reasonably accurate sort of version of where the graph is, okay? Now the first thing that you're going to do is going to factorize this expression. That's where that's come from, okay? So I've factorized this expression. I've then been able to put it equal to 0 to find the root where it crosses the x-axis. So I know this graph will cross the x-axis at x equals 5 and x equals 2. Now I've drawn out a bigger set of scales here just so I can plot these reasonably nicely. So I'm just going to mark roughly, and let me just go and choose a different colour pen. I'm going to do it in green. I'll mark 2 and 5. Now again, because this is an x squared graph, I know it's going to be this shape if it's positive and this shape if it's negative. So negative and positive, okay? If you're being positive, it looks like a smile. If you're being negative, it looks like you're having a bit of a grump. It goes down like that, okay? So we know it's going to go through 2 and 5. We know it's going to be this sort of shape because of its being a positive x squared. And then we also know it's going to cross the y-axis or whatever's left there. So that is going to be at the value of 10. Now you can also see in blue, I've gone and completed the square here. Now to complete the square, if I just rub that out for a second, we know that we're going to halve whatever this coefficient here is, including that minus. So I've halved that. Notice that the squared has gone over to here, and then I've taken away whatever that is squared. Now you always subtract whatever this number is squared, even if it's positive, even if it's negative, okay? And then simply here, all I've done is simplify minus 12.25 at 10. Now, just simplifying all the way down, I got this statement here. So we look to find the x value of what would make this bracket equal to 0. So that would obviously just be the positive version of this number here, 3.5. And y is whatever is left on the outside. You don't change this symbol here. So that will just be minus 2.25. So what I'm going to do now, at 3.5 and minus 2.25, so roughly there, that is going to be the minimum point. Now when I'm sketching my graph now, it's got to go through all of those points there. So roughly, now this is actually a really, really bad quadratic because it's not looking anything like it should do. So I'm just going to try that again. Looks something roughly like that, but obviously at 2, that should have been going through the x-axis there, okay? Now what I do need to do is just go and write on what that minimum point is. That's very important. It'll be worth a mark for putting that in and showing you understand it goes there, okay? So looking at the next graph here, loads of stuff. I can see that I've already factorized it, and I'm not going to go through how to do all of that, but you can see it's the same number twice, so I could just say it's that number squared. Now that means it's only going to hit that, that axis in one place. Okay, so it's not going to do something like this. It's going to do something more like, or not quite like that, where it just touches it in one place. Okay, now I can also go and show that by finding the minimum point there by completing the square. As x equals minus 8, the value that make that bracket 0, and there's nothing here, so y must be equal to 0. So I need to go and plot that minus 8, 0, so that's also the roots of it. So minus 8, 0 is going to be roughly there. Minus 8, 0. Now I know it's got to go through the y-axis at 64. So what I'm going to do is start to draw that quadratic out like that. As you can see, I'm way off here, okay? So I need to just move where I put my minus 8. So what I'll do is I'll just undo that. I'm just going to move it a bit closer there so I've got enough room to go and draw that quadratic through there, okay? So there's my quadratic doing something like that, and I need to mark that as 64. Okay, that's what I need to do to draw my quadratic successfully. The next one, now you can see here, when I started to look at this and you all found the same, it was very hard to go and factorize this. I couldn't think of a pair of numbers that times together to give 10 and added together to make 4. I'd just say question mark, question mark. What I could have done is I could have started using the quadratic formula. I could have started using minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, if I'd done that, it would have taken quite a lot of work, and actually when I put it into my calculator, I would have been told the following: math error. Now, rather than me doing all of that bit before, sorry, let me use the laser, before putting it into my calculator, I thought, let me just go and check what the minimum point is. Now, I went and found the minimum point, and completing the square gave me that, which gave me my minimum point, minus 2,6. So let me just go and plot minus 2,6 quickly. So minus 2,6, somewhere around here, minus 2,6. Now that's the minimum point. So this graph is going to do something like that. Well, it's not going to cross the x-axis, so there's going to be no roots. So that's what that's telling me. If I can't factorize something, and then I can't use the quadratic formula because it was unfactorizable, so I couldn't find a pair of numbers, and then I use the quadratic formula and it told me math error, it tells me there's no roots. So that was a question here which it said, explain your answer to C. It says, show that that has no real roots. Well, I can't factorize it. A really good way to show it would have been to actually go and demonstrate the quadratic formula didn't work. But also, for me, completing the square demonstrates it perfectly. The turning point, or the minimum point in this case, because it's a positive x squared graph, is above the x-axis. So therefore, no roots. Okay, so no roots here. Okay, next question. Now, this was a little bit sneaky because it had a minus here. Okay, now that minus is going to flip the graph. So it's the first time that we're going to see the graph doing that. We haven't had that yet because we've got a negative in front of the x squared. Now, to do this, the best way that I find to factorize when it's got a negative is I take a negative factor out of the entire expression. So you notice here, in fact, actually, I just noticed that I've made a small mistake in here, so I'll be able to correct this as we go through. Let me just go and rub those out there. You can see that I've taken the negative out here, outside there, to get negative x squared. So negative times by x squared would give me the negative x squared. The negative times by minus 5x would give me the plus 5x. But then this was my mistake. This should have been negative 14. So negative times by negative 14 would give me the plus 14 up there. Next, I'm looking for a pair of numbers that times this together to give me minus 14 and add together to minus 5. So that'd be minus 7 and plus 2 there. So my solutions must be x equals 7 and x equals minus 2. Okay? Now you can see over here, I've done exactly the same tactic to complete the square. I've just taken that minus factor out there so that when that is expanded, it would give me the same expression as up here. Then within the brackets, I've just completed the square as normal. And then once I got this expression here, I simplified these number terms. Minus 6.25 minus 14 is of course minus 20.25. The reason why that has changed to a positive is because I've done minus times by a minus to get that positive. Now the minus just goes with that bracket, okay? So still exactly the same things as before. We're looking to get my minimum point is going to be x equals, sorry, let me just change to a blue pen. X equals 2.5 because that's the value that makes the bracket 0. So that's where I'm getting that from. So nothing changed. That minus doesn't do anything except it changes the direction of that parabola. So it's not a U-shaped, it's going to be like an N-shaped graph. And 20.25 is what is left, or positive 20.25. So I'm going to go and plot that, 2.5 and 20.25. So 2.5 and 20.25. I know it's going to cross the y-axis at plus 14. In fact, actually, I'm just going to move that over a little bit, just so I've got a little bit more space. So I know it's going to do an N shape like that, going through 14 there. Then it's going to do something like that. This value here is going to be the minus 2, and this value here is going to be the 7. Okay, so that's how we do that type of question. Okay, the next one had a coefficient. So this is rather like the mock question. It had a coefficient in front of the x squared. So to do these type of questions, you're going to multiply the first and the last term to get positive 8, or just 8. And they're going to add up together to give me 9. So my pair of numbers that do that are plus 8 and minus 1. I've then gone through and factorised those, although I should have been saying every time, I don't know why I said equals, I should have said equals 0 equals 0. I've now got my roots as minus a half and minus 4, so I'm just going to go and plot those in now. So minus 0.5 minus 4. I've got my completed the square here, so you can see I took a factor of 2 out. Now I did it just on the first two terms. You can include the 4 if you want, It really is up to you, whatever makes your life easier. But when I took out that factor here of 2, I then completed the square with inside these brackets, because that 2 is going to have to multiply both of those things. So the common misconception and the common thing that people get wrong is they forget to do 2 times by whatever 2.25 squared is. Once I've times that by 2 and added on 4, I've got that as my point there. So I've got minus 2.25 and minus 6.125 as my minimum point. So somewhere in between those. In fact, it'll be exactly in the middle of those. It is symmetrical. So that's going to be minus 2. Let me put the point in a better place. Minus 2.25, comma, minus 6.125, and I know it must cross the y-axis at plus 4. So drawing my quadratic, it will look something like this. Okay, and I've got to go and mark in that is 4 as well. Okay, I've just drawn over that 4, so I'm just going to rewrite that to make it really nice and clear to anyone looking at my work what that number is. I'd recommend you do the same as well. I'll do the same with the minus there. Okay, lovely stuff. So last question then. We had another negative one. So again, that same strategy of taking that negative out and then factorising all of that. So notice how that minus 5x inside the brackets changes to plus 5x. That's because minus 5 times plus 5x will give you the minus 5x. The same for the minus 4. Minus times by plus 4 would give me minus 4 there. So factorising in here, now that makes no difference. That minus just changes the direction of the graph. So the roots are still going to be the values that make that 0. So minus 4 and minus 1. And then I've completed the square over here. So again, same tactic. I've left the minus outside there. And then I've completed the square and then just expanded that minus times by, it would be minus 2.25, which is why that changed to plus. So if we start putting in all that key information now, we're going to get minus 1 here. We're going to get minus 4 here. Because that's a minus x squared, I know it's going to do that sort of shape. And we're looking for the value that makes this bracket 0. So that's going to be x equals 2.5, minus 2.5. No need to worry about this negative here. It doesn't do anything apart from the shape. And then y would be equal to 2.25. So if I go and plot that value now, minus 2.5 for x, so roughly here, and then 2.25, so roughly there. Mark that then on your graph, 2.5, sorry, let me write that a bit neater, 2.5, comma, 2.25. We know it's going to go through the y-axis at minus 4, so my graph is going to look something like that. Okay, thank you very much for watching. I hope that was useful, and use that to just consolidate your prep. Thanks again.